All right, this time I would like to call the regular Board of Finance meeting to order for March 17th. Roll call. Tom Sinkowitz, Don Terrell. Here. Dean Norman. Here. Travis Hines. Here. David Remain. Here. Gary Stelborn. Absent. Matt Ray. Present. Keith Schiller. Present. And Matt, you're all for voting rights and Gary's absence. All set. All right, acceptance of the minutes from the February 17th, 2021 meeting. Minutes were posted and distributed. Questions, comments on the minutes? I move that we accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed?
Abstention.
One abstention? Two abstentions. Motion carries. Item 1 under new business. Discuss and act on line item transfers. Did everybody get the line item transfers? They were sent out?
I did.
You do not have a copy? Okay. Okay, next one. Okay. Everybody else did that? All right, good. Kevin, any comments on the line item transfers that you'd like to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll see what you have in your packet with you is a list of the expended items. If you want me, I can go through them line by line. It's no problem at all.
Yep.
First one is the expense for $3,644 for vehicle purchases. It was put out to bid for two police vehicles. The bid came back in a little higher than we anticipated, so that's why the overage for $3,644. Highway, we expended a lot of our money through the February storms that we had. A lot of them were ice storms and smaller storms, but they did expend it. So that's why the $18,000 is expended. $4,000 for animal control salaries. We have a staff member who had gone on operation, came back, so we did have expenses there based on the fact that that person was out and needed to cover. The other one is in the tax refund. We had a very large tax refund due to a settlement from a year back, so we had to cover that for this year. That's $4,000 for that. And then there's a town revale, which, because the RFP was not signed by NECOG, we anticipated a certain number, it came back a little higher. So the grand total is $31,744. And where do we get that money from? You'll see below, it talks about the highway fuel for $5,000. They had done a very good year so far, so they had $5,000 for that. Unemployment benefits. To this point, we had some extra money coming back into unemployment, so that covered that. The police department were able to find in their vehicle expense $3,644 of that. We also talked about the highway sand and gravel. They still had paid overspend, they had enough in there, so they had $10,000 available. Same thing with bituminous. He said he could still go through getting bituminous in the spring, but he's got $5,000 left in that line item. And then we have legal notices and advertising. We anticipated that we'd be using some more of the legal notices. We have not. Therefore, we have $100 left in there for the exact amount of $31,744. Any questions on any of those? Okay.
Thanks, Kevin. There's no questions or comments. Is there a motion to accept line item transfers as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries to approve the line item transfers at the total amount of $31,744. All right, item 2 under new business, discuss Board of Ed 2% savings. So everyone should have gotten an email that it's been sent out by Kelly with some explanation on it in regards to the 2%, but as those of you who've been on the board remember, that was what we adopted last year as a resolution, the 2% savings that can be set aside on Board of Ed side. There were a couple of questions I do remember that came up from the auditor, and that was something that I wanted to bring up tonight. What was the concerns about the
The handout that I shared with you guys, if you notice on that, it states that every year the Board of Finance has to make a motion to set aside the money. So every year, Board of Finance meeting, you have to make a motion to set aside the money to be used by education department. When I started talking to the auditors about it, they started asking me some questions, which I was like, well, we need to clarify some stuff. So if school budget is comprised of mill rate, state ECS money, and then local tuition, which is Sterling or special ed. So if those revenues don't get brought in, then we're short. You know, and that's how the budget's created. The budget's created for the mill rate and all those revenues. So if those revenues don't come in, you're going to be using, at the end of the year, the net fund balance to offset the loss of revenue, because the school department will be rolling their money into that 2% account. So the auditor and I started discussing that maybe there should be a practice of netting the loss of revenue and the expenditures and have that offset that 2%. Because if not, you'll just go through your fund balance probably within a few years. Because the town will be the only one contributing to the fund balance. The school won't, because they'll have that 2% account. So just start a discussion on that so you guys can think about it and look at those other aspects, I guess, that we didn't see before.
Now, the verbiage on there is up to 2%. There's nothing that
Yes.
stipulates a hard 2%
No, it doesn't. It says
of
up to.
unexpended
Correct.
funds.
Correct. Yep. Yes.
So there,
Because you know, in the past, our fund balance has grown based on excessive revenue, we brought in more money, or if the school and town didn't spend as much, that net would go into the fund balance. So going forward, if we just do this every year, it's just going to be the town portion going into the fund balance, not the school anymore. So just, you know,
if
we
it,
have to think of how it'll affect it over the years.
if it was on like an automatic 2%, you're saying,
Yes.
without some guidance or due diligence towards the
Correct.
long-term ramifications.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, that's how the discussion came about with the auditors.
Were they also wondering about how it gets approved by the public? Because obviously we know as a Board of Finance that we have to.
Yeah, that clarified it. When I read it in here that the Board of Finance has to motion and approve it every year, then you guys would motion to approve whether they can use it or not, or how much they can use, you know, towards the budget for the next year's budget.
Because we don't, the public does not vote on it separately. We never set it up like that.
We
vote on it
never
separately.
did, but you're gonna want to follow similar to the fund balance, like how we use the fund balance right now. Anything over 50,000, town meeting, and the public votes on it, unless it's specified in the budget, you know, fund balance, a truck in the dollar amount, and then they vote on it in the budget. Just so the public acknowledges what it's being used for.
Right. And that was also kind of a segue, I remember, about possibility of us getting something put on paper right now, because while we have the statute to go according to, and we got Ken's, right up here. The fact is, if somebody from the public came in, if they want to look at our fund balance policy, we can pull out the fund balance policy on the product. That's what we voted on, that's what we adopted. But we don't exactly have that
Yes.
exact document right now
Yes.
for this 2%. So
Correct.
personally, I think that probably wouldn't be a bad idea, even though it may not be required.
Yep.
So something that we could certainly consider. But we would need to, something that could be drafted up.
Yes.
Kevin,
I would
said
think
probably
that's-
would want to get it reviewed by the town attorney to make sure, it's good, and then we would need to vote on it to accept it.
Do you think that's a good idea to net out the revenue and expenditures? Like, how do you guys do it?
Are you speaking of netting just the school side or
Yeah,
the between both the town and the schools.
Because if we roll over a percentage every year into that account, I'm assuming you'd want to net, if the revenue was short or more, net them together. Because if not, then the fund balance would absorb it or, increase or decrease based on the revenue.
Is there a maximum that account can be built up to?
You guys, I guess you could set it, because in here it says the Board of Finance can vote on it every year. It says up to 2%, it doesn't say 2%, so it's the authority goes to the Board of Finance what you choose.
2% of that operating budget for the school
Yeah.
annually. If I understood the question, it was
Yeah.
the money that account can be put into, is there a cap on the long-term value of that account?
That has to be spent the following year?
However my assumption is, yeah, because I don't think you would want to grow another fund balance.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
That's what the auditor kind of said to me, he's like, you're growing another fund balance.
That sounds to me like it's a fund balance specifically for the school department's use, and that could grow.
Yes. So that's why every year you would vote on it, so you guys could have,
We can
$1 million,
also-
there's $1 million there, well, we're
Right.
not gonna let you use 2% or whatever.
We don't set mill rates to build savings accounts.
Yes, correct.
But the point is that we can also change it, so, going back to your question, that even though when we adopted, we didn't have an exact set money amount, dollar amount that have to cap that, but we can certainly change it when we vote on it, because we have to do it annually. So if we wanted to revise what we had originally adopted last year.
But what if we don't do the 2%? What happens to the money that?
It
Let's say
goes into the fund balance.
Say
All
Goes to
the
fund
other
balance.
it goes to the fund balance automatically?
Right, because that was one thing Kelly and I had talked about when we were talking about the pension. I know we were talking about, as far as what the money could be used for, we talked about that last meeting. What money from this could be used for, and Matt brought up that concern too. Are there any restrictions?
Right.
But the way I would think of it is like this, well, it's no different than if the school wanted, to apply it from something from the fund balance to be applied to, one of their
It's the same,
expenses.
yeah, it's kind of like the same principle, because you can use, say, the fund balance for a pension or, a purchase of something, this excess it's the same as the fund balance that we have.
Without
The
going to a
towns.
town meeting.
Right. If I remember my concern, or I'll say my question, was whether upon there being 2% of the budget put into this account, when the Board of Ed wanted to access those funds, whether they would have to go expenditure by expenditure coming to the Board of Finance to request permission to use the funds.
Right.
What this guideline is telling me is that as part of this annual process, we can set, if there is a underrun, that we can tell them, yeah, we'll approve up to from between 0 and 2% that you guys can hold on to, and they're free to use that as they wish throughout that upcoming fiscal year. They wouldn't be coming to us
I don't
for,
know, how would you feel if the fund balance, we have restrictions on that? Because you don't want us to just freely, the town, just spend the money.
well,
You know what I mean?
that element I understand to be within the jurisdiction of policies regarding the town fund balance. For this 2% set aside,
You could set up policies if you want, for such.
right. It seems to me like generally we wouldn't be dealing, over time that account value could grow, but it doesn't feel like we'd be dealing with, there's no way to know whether you're going to be dealing with consistently large budget underruns coming from the school side.
Well, last year was a large budget run, and this year will be too. So probably by the end of this audit, there'll be $1 million or more in there.
Well, I certainly think that a policy document regarding this is necessary.
Yeah.
And definitely having legal take a strong look at this too, to make sure it's lining up with state statute. But it seems to me like it would be more towards an annual process determining the amount of that 2% that we would be allocating, either to say the Board of Ed has jurisdiction over how they want to use it, or whether we would be turning around and using it in the town fund balance. But I don't know how you would want to word a motion, but I think certainly setting a soon turnaround on a policy document regarding these would be prudent.
Another thing, Kelly, is were we able to compare this type of policy to any other town that adopted it, or is there like no other town?
I don't know of any of the towns that does the 2%.
We could ask CCM if they can do the homework for us.
Yeah, I talked to the auditors and he doesn't know them either, so we can do some homework.
All right. Didn't have it on the agenda, of course, to act on anything tonight. Certainly wanted feedback from the members. So we will have it, of course, again on future agenda because one of the things we're going to have to do is vote on it anyway to adopt it. But definitely would like to get some more information and look at putting together a draft.
Mr. Chair, would we send ideas and recommendations directly to you for the formation of this policy document?
Yeah. Now, Kevin, the Board of Selectmen, you guys had adopted it before we had voted on it, right? So would the Board of Selectmen want to look at it again?
We will look at in cooperation with the Board of Finance.
Okay.
Again, we're getting some more feedback from legal to see how we're supposed to process in the future.
Okay. All right, anything else on the 2% savings? All right, moving on to item number 3, discuss and review current fiscal year 2021 budget statement. Everybody got that? Okay, good. Kelly, anything to note?
We didn't get any additional revenue, because I think last time we spoke, we got ECS money, so we usually receive our last payment in April, so that hasn't arrived yet. Magic Tucket, one of the payments should be coming in the month of March, I haven't seen it yet, but that should be coming shortly. Out-of-town tuition, we got another payment from the town of Sterling. Right now, we're at $890,000, budgeted at $1.4 million. So I can speak to Ron to see where we're coming on that. We might, that's the item that I think we can be short on.
What's this per student fee for Sterling?
Oh, how much it is per student? I don't know. Do you know?
Not sure.
No, I don't know that off the top. No. Recreation receipts, nothing yet, but I think he's going to open up enrollment for recreation. It's an online enrollment this year, so we'll see how that goes. It should be beneficial to the town. Investment interest is low due to low interest rates. And all of these, like building permits, planning and zoning applications, town clerk fees, they're all posted through February. So we still have February, March, April, May, June. We have 4 months left still. So you can see all those line items are going to be more than what we budgeted. So that's beneficial to the town. And February tax revenue is posted through February. So that's where we're at right now. 28 million budgeted, and we're at 27.1. Any questions on the revenue?
Property tax revenue seems to be right about
Yeah,
where you
it is.
expected it to be.
I was worried about that due to COVID, but so far so good. Yeah. So expenditures. Oh, the highway department, we talked about the overtime, we did a line item transfer. They had 4 storms in February, and they averaged about 10,000 overtime, so that's where both of the money was the storms in February.
Kevin, do you remember, was there still a truck that was down or in repair? Or are they all?
They're all set.
They're all set.
Unemployment, we can still, it's like page 6. Unemployment is still a credit. We still have a credit with the state of Connecticut. I received a current bill for like $900, so that's still a credit as of now with the state of Connecticut.
What happens at year-end close with a credit on that account?
Good question. It's, I guess you could, I don't know.
Do they just roll it over?
That's what I'm thinking, because I'm gonna have a credit still on the state of Connecticut, for it. So we'll see if any big, unemployment claims come. I don't think there
roll over only because what happened in this case was actually part of it was from last year. So we get the check from, total, was part of it from last year and some from this year. So I'm thinking that they would continue, do the continuation rollover.
Yeah, put it in a accrued account and offset to expenditure.
Okay. Would that be impacting the budget development for the upcoming fiscal year on that line?
Well, that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. That's pretty much what if you guys have any questions on any other expenditures.
Kevin, with restrictions going back a little bit, do you have any idea on a time frame for getting the pool open, try to bring in some revenue?
If you take a look online, you'll see that there's a new Facebook page by the Park and Recreation. So they kind of did a rename, retag themselves. He's already talking about, he's taking in applications right now to get the pool open. So we're hoping sometime first or second week in April, it will be coming back in a limited capacity to be able to start back up again. Same thing with the summer rec programs and all of the stuff in the springtime. He's already working on getting different programs for that as well. So we'll start seeing some revenue coming in right away.
Mr. First Selectman, regarding like the gradual reopening, what would the town be liable for in terms of, you know, COVID exposure or anything like that if someone was to approach the town with a claim saying that, you know, us reopening through this exposed them to COVID or anything like that? Is there protection on the town?
Well, I think that you need to understand the whole process. I mean, you do contact tracing, try to find if you know exactly where it came from. For legal or liabilities, I don't think there's a lot out there because you really can't say exactly, I received COVID from you or somebody else.
I guess that's the spirit of my question,
Yeah.
is whether like there's
It's hard to
any
prove.
need.
It's hard to prove, so I don't think we have the issues there. All we can do is this. We can do like we're doing right now. We're spacing ourselves out. We're asking you to wear the masks. We will provide as many opportunities for the sanitizers and continue on with that process. As the governor makes changes to the numbers, we'll adjust as those numbers happen. But again, we're still going to continue to follow those guidelines. I can relate that to some events that could be happening. We're still talking about the VJ parade. We're talking about the Plainfield celebration day. We're talking about different events like Bike Night. At every opportunity for those meetings, I've been telling people that what we are having to do is still watch out for the COVID issues. So, like an example for VJ parade, I offered them some of the masks so that they can walk down the aisles before, if they wanted to do it that way, to be able to pass them out if anybody wanted them. Same thing with Purells or anything like that. I would encourage the same events to have the same type of safety issues in front of them. So for liability for the town to open up, we'll try to follow as best we can and follow contact tracing as required.
Office on a weekly basis?
I talked to the Lieutenant Governor today.
Thank you. That's every week?
With her, it's every other week. We've had another issue, so she's helping us out with that. But we do a weekly meeting with the Emergency Management Region 4. That's every Wednesday. We talk about issues that are outstanding. We talk about the number changes, and every Thursday there are updates to the numbers. They haven't been bad. They really haven't been for Plainfield. We're with 2 on average running cycle for 2-week period. Looks like the numbers are coming down. Then of course every once in a while you get a spike up to 4 or 5 people in one day. We're okay. Could do better. We really could do better.
But the fact that you're in contact
Oh,
on
yeah.
a scheduled basis?
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments regarding your budget statement? All right, hearing none. Moving on to discuss and review the current Board of Ed financial report.
Mr. Chair, the only two big takeaways I have from the Board of Ed finance report, one we spoke to in part, which is the size of the budget underrun they're looking at come the end of the year. It looks like the number could be closer to the $700,000 figure than they were anticipating. And every week we get closer to that being the final number. So I guess that's something to keep a close eye on, and probably just adds emphasis to the importance of getting a good policy document for guidance on those 2% potential savings. The second one being the use of the ESSER funds, the emergency relief funds, and the numerous waves of those. This is really a question I would pose towards the Board of Ed, not necessarily this body, but just the limitations on how those funds can be used, and how the usage of those funds, not only when they might happen for which budget year, but how that might impact proposed budgets going forward. I think there's a risk to receiving the big pile of money from the feds, and then kind of, I'll say, masking some of the true costs within a budget in that case. And if we don't have clear guidance on how those funds can and cannot be used, that could put us in a bit of an awkward position trying to determine what a healthy savings percentage on holdover of funds or for the fund balance might be, depending on where they're guiding these funds to go to, either capital improvement projects or the such. But those are my two big takeaways.
Yeah, Kelly, I'll follow up with Ron and Ken regarding that, and before we have our meeting, which is on April 7th, for the Board of Ed budget, we'll see if we can maybe get an update out to the board members regarding the ESSER.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I would definitely like to sit down with you and Kelly to go over the ESSER funding. I did some homework on it this past weekend to find out what could be and what could not be used for ESSER funding. The ESSER funding 1, 2, and 3. 3 is looking like about $3.5 million. I looked at the guidelines as what to be used for, and I'd like to talk to you about that. You do realize that the ESSER funds from this $1.9 trillion bill that just passed also comes to the town of Plainfield. And there's guidelines for that as well, and we will talk about what we could use it for. So I'd like to have that discussion with you, Pat.
Yeah, and again, my thought was trying to get, we'll get an update out via email to the board members prior to that, because as we start having our budget meetings and we're looking more closely at the Board of Ed budget, I know that question is going to come up, but it's already come up to a couple people I've talked to in the public, which is based on savings that we have from last year, as we were just talking about, and based on all financial support that's coming in from the feds and the state. Many would believe that with all this in mind, that the Board of Ed really shouldn't have to be asking the town for more money, and that basically everything should be able to be budgeted pretty flatline with that coming in. Obviously, that remains to be seen. We don't want to make assumptions until we've actually had the binders and we have the Board of Ed presentation. So we'll wait until then to discuss it further. But that was something that's already been brought up as far as, again, how much more, besides all that money coming in, how much more is the Board of Ed going to look at getting to the town, and is that really necessary, or could they go back and try to rework that a bit? So we'll be talking about that. Anything else on the financial statement from the Board of Ed? All right, moving on to item number 5, Police Department update. Everybody got the packet that she just handed out, so I'll make sure I got numbers. Okay, very good. So this time I would like to recognize our new chief of the department, Mario Ariaga. I'm sure I can speak for the rest of the board. Congratulations to you, our new deputy chief, on your promotions, and certainly looking forward to working with you in the future, talking about the budget.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I put together this packet. Hopefully it covers things that I may have missed. Hopefully I don't miss anything, but if I do, it is on there. And I know most of you here, but some of you probably don't know a little bit about myself. I've been with the department for about 22 years. I started out in 1999 as a dispatcher, and then worked my way through the ranks. In the last 8.5 years, I was actually assistant chief superintendent as his second in command. So that's a little bit about me. I am married, I do live in town. My wife, Michelle, is a lifelong resident from Plainfield. I have 2 children, my son, Jace, who is 11, my daughter, Jada, who is 9. And I've been living in Plainfield for about 18, 19 years now. And my wife also runs a small business here in town as well. So this is our hometown, and you know, we love this place. It's a little bit about me. This is my new deputy chief, Will Wolfberg. He is also a Plainfield resident. He too started off as a dispatcher. He's been here for about 9 years, and he's just a phenomenal guy to have as my sidekick and my number 2 over here. A couple things that I wanted to bring up today about updates on the PD itself. So maybe last year sometime, our retired chief superintendent had brought up the police accountability bill. That's a big hot topic all across Connecticut. And not for nothing, there are a lot of good things in that bill. I do believe it was rushed, but there are a lot of good things in that bill. So basically what I did is kind of put together a whole list of what it's going to impact financially for the town of Plainfield. Because there's like about 20 different sections of that bill. And what I did is highlight a few that really play an important role in what we do here on out. And one of them is drug testing of police officers. Everybody says, we don't drug test police officers. No, we do, but we only drug test them prior to getting hired. Once they pass that test, they're never drug tested again. And it becomes a whole union issue and fighting this or that. Now this actually requires the drug test of police officers upon recertification every 3 years or so. It's a minute charge that runs roughly between $50 and $100 for that drug testing. And honestly, it's worth every penny, and it just shows the consistency of what we're doing with the police officers. So that's done usually every 3 years during recertification. Behavioral health assessment. So basically what this is like a psychological exam. Again, we do this for every police officer coming on. And when we do that, the cost is about $1,000 per applicant. We only send pretty much our top tier ones that will have a chance of moving on in the process. So we don't just send 20, 30 applicants. We'll send maybe our top 2 to get an evaluation done. And from that top 2 is usually who we end up hiring and who the police commission selects. Now we're requiring every 5 years for a police officer to get that done. It's not a full exam, but it is an exam for about 45 minutes to an hour where you sit with the doctor and they will ask you a series of questions. Now that will be at a cost of approximately $250. The good thing about it is we don't really just send all 19 of our police officers right away. We actually offset them over the course of 5 years. So I'll do 20% this year, I'll do 20% the following year, until we get up to where we need to go of all our officers. So it's not a big hit initially, but over the course of 5 years, you're probably at $250 an officer. Body-worn cameras, another big thing, and dashboard cameras. We're ahead of time. We've had body-worn cameras for the last 4 or 5 years. Officers are required to wear them on every single call that they go to. So we're way ahead of that game. It's going to come a time where we're going to have to eventually replace them because they only have a shelf expectancy of about 3 to 4 years. We are chugging away with them. They're still doing well. The only thing we don't have that they are going to be requiring in the next few years, and which you will see in eventually the capital improvements, is dashboard cameras. Dashboard cameras, they want connected to your body cameras. Basically, wherever you go, whatever you do, they want it recorded. Years ago, we did have them. They never functioned properly. We did not invest properly in them years ago. They were pretty much handheld cameras put on the dash, and you take out the tapes and you keep recycling them. That was what we had. It just never functioned. Good thing about the dashboard grants is, dashboard cameras is that they do have grants. So we will be chugging away trying to get those to alleviate any of the costs. We would have to equip all our vehicles with them, and you're looking at upwards of about $100,000 to accomplish that task. And it would coincide with our body cameras so everything would actually function together. Use of force reporting, a new bill just passed recently that actually prolonged the changes of the use of force policy in the Accountability Act. I think it was within the last couple of days. And basically it focused on chokeholds and different things that cops can do. They initially wanted you to decide if you needed to use deadly force. They wanted you to try all your other avenues first. Sometimes you don't have that opportunity to do so. And they wanted all these officers who've been trained a certain way to go out and use that force. Well, you need to train the officers now in a different way. You can't just throw them to the wolves and say this is what you need to do. So that's been pushed off a little bit, so it allows everybody to come on the same page on the proper use of force. So that's stuff in relation to the police accountability bill. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Are there a majority of these provisions that are yet to become effective?
Correct. So there's some of them that have offset dates, like body cameras. I'm just going to go off the top of my head. Maybe it's 2024 that it has to be implemented. They're talking about CLIA accreditation, which is like a paid accreditation. And to be honest with you, that it is good. It's nice to have. It doesn't lower your insurance. It just says that you follow these standards, which we already follow. There are some things that we can't just based on our size. But people that get accredited actually have a design person that does that, because it's not just accreditation you're done. It is something that's done time and time and time again. It's almost like you have to have a full staff to just work on accreditation. They're saying that all law enforcement agencies in the state of Connecticut must be accredited by 2025. It's virtually impossible to actually get that done, because itself is a 3 to 5 year process just to do it. And it's multiple steps to get to that accreditation. But again, it doesn't give you anything extra. It just says that you must follow these rules, you must have this, you must have 3 cameras instead of 2 cameras in the cell, you must have audio here, not here, and that's all it does. But then it doesn't have any penalties if you don't get it. And it doesn't make it that you can actually be sued if you don't have it. So I think that's going to change over the course of time. I don't know exactly when, but I believe that's going to change because it's such a process. And CLIA is a paid institution, you pay them. You know, so they can change the standards, and then you're going to have to pay more to get to those standards. So it's not like a free accreditation where you can try to get to. They change, you pay them, you pay them, you pay them, you pay them, and then change standards, you got to pay them more. Is it a good thing? Yes, if you're able to just dedicate a full staff to it. But I think that would change.
Thank you.
Any other questions on police accreditation? Jail cells. Our jail cells have been completed. They are night and day. If you see in there, I actually put some photos of the new cells versus the old cells. We budgeted $192,000. I think the board approved that. It was so long, it was about a year ago. Everybody approved $192,808.09 to replace the cells. It actually came in under budget, which usually never happens for anything. A couple $1,000, which was great. During that time, we had to make a memorandum of understanding with another agency to house our prisoners while we had our downtime. That worked out well. It actually worked out pretty flawlessly. But we are up and running, and I would say probably within the first 24 hours, we had unfortunately 3 or 4 people in there. So right now, they are functional, and they came out actually pretty good. Matter Construction did an awesome job, and they were great to work with. Any questions on the jail cells? Mr. Chairman, the next topic is, I believe, your number 6. Do you want me to just keep continuing?
Yeah, I'll just note that if there's no questions regarding the jail cells or police accountability, that was the police department update. So item 6 is to discuss and act on police communication upgrade and send to town meeting. So we can start the discussion phase.
Sure. So over the last several years, we have invested thousands upon thousands of dollars to repair our communications. And when I talk about communication, I'm talking about our mobile radios, for our vehicles, our portable radios that the officers have on them, as well as our dispatch consoles. We run an analog system, and our infrastructure is very old and outdated. We have replaced our antennas, we have replaced repeaters, we have put repeaters inside vehicles, we have replaced mobile radios, we replaced portable radios. We have replaced everything what we could do to make this the best as possible, given what we have. You can only badly fix something so many times to where you realize that you need a new system. And this has been talked at several police commission meetings regarding our radios and our issues. The thing is, how we never incorporated into our 5-year capital is the fact that, and I'll get into the state system, is the fact that to put a whole new system for Plainfield PD with new towers spread out throughout town, a digital system, new portables, new mobile, a new dispatch console, to build really an infrastructure for Plainfield PD, you're talking $500,000 to $1 million. It is not feasible, in my opinion, at this point in time, to be able to come forward and request $1 million to build a radio system, when we have some other alternatives that we can do for a lot less. So what the state offers is a program, basically, it is to jump on their network. So the state of Connecticut has a network and towers throughout the state of Connecticut. And what they have offered us is to jump onto their system for free. We don't pay a dime for their system, we jump on their system, and it is a digital quality system. So I can be standing from here to you, it will be crystal clear. I can be in Hartford transporting a prisoner, trying to communicate with dispatch, crystal clear. I can be in Litchfield County transporting a prisoner and still communicate. If I was to get on Plainfield PD radio, I can't even reach dispatch from inside this building. It's just virtually impossible. I probably have to go to different corners of the building. So what this system is basically a digital system, but what we would have to do is replace our equipment. And our equipment would be new portable radios, new mobile radios, and new dispatch console. And what that would do is basically, again, we use their network, their towers. So if anything went down, like at the tower for the state of Connecticut, we don't fix. The state of Connecticut fixes it. We'd still be up and running because we'd be utilizing other, let's say, towers. Now, what we do is if our antenna went, or we would have to pay approximately $2,000 for somebody to climb the tower and repair our antenna, which we just did the last fiscal year. And it just cost $2,000 to get somebody to climb the tower. So, to me, it makes sense to jump onto this system that is free, though the initial major hit would be to buy the new equipment. And after that it's bought, there is no maintenance that we have to do, other than if a radio goes down because somebody broke it, jumped in the water, but that would be a one-time either fix or replacement. It is just the initial hit to go onto that system itself. There's a lot of pros to going to digital, because of obviously the reception, and if the radio interferences are not as bad for digital, but if there are interferences, you can automatically tell because it won't allow you to transmit. Whereas our portables has a lot of interference, and anybody that listens to the scanner knows that their radios are not that good. You can't hear the dispatch and action to repeat, etc. So that is a little bit about the radio system itself. And again, it would be onto the state network. This has been done by multiple PDs, and to be honest with you, PDs left and right are jumping on board. Municipalities can still jump on board, from highway departments to schools, education. They can also jump on this same exact system. Basically what they do is they give you like a bunch of channels, I guess you can call it, and you utilize those channels to communicate with your agency. So to replace all that, it is approximately $110,000, so a little bit under $110,000. And what that does is it replaces every portable, every mobile for every vehicle, and also replaces dispatch console with a backup dispatch console, just in case our console inside goes down. I know that was a lot. Any questions about that so far? Mr. Devane?
Does the highway department use any of the same equipment you do, and are they going to be included?
So the highway department uses our current equipment right now. That equipment's not going to go away, so they have their own channels basically on, they utilize the same tower, and Mr. Irons will probably be a little bit more clear on that, because he knows a little bit more about how the system works. They are on their own frequencies, but they use an analog system as well. They would still be able to continue to use that. The first selectman would have to decide whether or not he wanted to have the highway department jump on that at a later date.
Are there any other agencies in town that use radios, or the building inspector have one that
Cell phone. They all use cell phone.
doesn't use cell phone?
Yeah, like building inspector cell phone.
So hypothetically speaking, if the Board of Ed decided to go on to this system as well, we could literally change over some channels and just start communicating with the Board of Ed, whether it's security or in the front office.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How long has the state provided this digital option?
So it is more hot now in the last year or two. I don't know exactly how long they offer it, not that long because they were building their networks, but a lot of places are jumping on it. Rock City just did, Waterford, East Line, Groton, Stonington. We were actually testing radios throughout town. We're actually testing them right now. And then some town from way out west jumped on and said, "Are you testing radios? Because we're testing too." And it was crystal clear. We were just communicating with each other. It is literally night and day. The first selectman I did in his office, it's really night and day. I wish I could do it here now, but they're all testing it.
Are there any pitfalls that you're aware of, any inconsistencies on the state network that anybody's reported up to this point?
With anything with technology, you're going to have your dead spots. You're going to have your spots where it's not going to transmit. We did find a couple spots that did not transmit, but we also moved 20 feet and it was just crystal clear right after that. The good thing about it is it will tell you, it will really click and tell you you're not getting through. And then all you have to do is move the information or the sound to the other port. But as far as I know, any major issues, no. Speaking with the state of Connecticut, myself and the deputy chief were with them for, I want to say, a good 2-3 hours, and they said that our coverage is only going to get better because of the system that they're opening up, the K system, at Troop K in Colchester, which we were like, okay, that's far away. But they said, no, that's going to actually open up more channels, let's say, for you to have better communication.
It seems to me like there's a lot of incentive here over the long term for towns to jump on this if they are dealing with anything that's less than optimal in terms of radio connectivity.
Correct.
Which I would assume, I am no tech expert on this by any means, but I would assume the more towns join this network and the need for additional towers or whatever you would need for this would potentially only strengthen the system.
Correct. And the good part about it, and again, if something goes down, it's not our fix. And if something goes down, there's backup after backup. So it's not costing the taxpayers in Plainfield any additional money because a tower went down. The state of Connecticut's fixing that because everybody's running on it.
To be fair, that can be flipped from a perspective of risk as well. If something was to go wrong, it is out of your hands to fix it.
100%. 100%.
How does this tie in with Travis?
We have to sit down with Mr. Irons and actually go through that.
So we will have the option to communicate with them on this new system as we do currently today. And also, within the next month or so, the fire departments in town are launching a new radio system that's also going to be interfaced to the state system that he's talking about. So it only lends to interoperability between all the agencies.
So all the agencies, the ambulance and whatever, is it all going to be?
Everybody's
Everybody's going to be tied into this?
Everybody's going to be able to talk, and to the chief's point, it'll be a better quality.
Thank you.
Mr. Irons' point, I suppose that would also mean down the road we'd be looking at expenditures to support the equipment upgrades for the fire departments as well.
I mean, potentially. Those costs have been, we've been slowly chipping away at those in the budget over time. So it's not going to be a hard hit, if you will, similar to what the police department are experiencing right now. Yeah.
What would this mean for our existing infrastructure if there was to be a switch over? Would there be a concerted effort, you believe, to dismantle it?
So, and again, Mr. Irons will probably correct me on this, the frequencies we have now are actually hard to come by, so we would not want to give those up. And I may be wrong using the wording of frequencies, but what we have right now are actually hard to get. So we would actually still have that. Or work with the fire department if they needed those for some reason, to be able to have it. We don't want to lose what is very hard to come by with our frequencies. So we would either transition something to a fire department who maybe utilize them, and if we ever, for some reason, ever needed that, at least we know we can borrow them from them. That's a little bit, I don't know exactly.
I-
That's what I'm thinking.
That's not, I guess, that's not entirely a fair question for me to ask. I guess what the view I'm looking at is there would still be a maintenance cost of our existing channels, even if we were to switch, if we were to retain this
No,
infrastructure.
because we wouldn't retain it the same way we're retaining it now. But if like, if the power, the power went down, because we wouldn't really know, because it would really be kind of sitting. You know, there would be no need to be checking it, because we would be on the same system. So it's not like we would utilize it as a backup system. So there's a lot still to that, and you know, but I know there's no maintenance. There's not going to be maintenance as it relates to that.
Is this something that you're proposing in addition to the existing budget you have proposed?
So that's a good question, and thankfully Kelly's here. So basically what we were looking to do is we have money in our salaries to cover the cost of this equipment. And the reason why is, and Kelly can get into that in a little bit about the COVID funds, but I kind of broke it down in that packet for you to explain. So we had retirement, obviously, in our salary. There's a few officers that we could not hire because of the academy so pushed back. We also had a departure. So these are funds that we also have saved that we will utilize for the extra $15,000 that are needed, because we're actually getting an extra $95,000 placed into our salaries. And I'll just let Kelly talk about that real quick.
Yeah, those were COVID funds from the federal government that was passed in the state of Connecticut, and we use those funds for emergency personnel, for their salaries. Due to COVID, the additional duties that they had to, entail. So I was able to credit, based on their payroll, a substantial amount.
So $95,000 was credited there, and we would have to come up with the extra 15, which we still have in salaries. So it's not like I'm coming to ask for an extra $110,000 to be added to the budget. We're just actually going to take it now because of what we got from COVID. And eventually I'll have to come to you for a line transfer to the person that can do that.
What would happen when the old equipment?
Yes, yeah, that's a lot, because I really don't know yet. I don't know. We wouldn't get rid of it. Maybe if we could sell some of the portables. I don't know. I don't know what they're even worth. I don't have those answers. I don't want to give you the wrong ones.
Kelly, could you explain the financial piece of that one more time, just so I understand? The estimated price tag is $110K.
Yeah. So he had salaries of officers that were going out patrolling due to COVID, and additional duties. So federal government sent state of Connecticut some funding, and a portion of that funding could be for emergency personnel. So that's us, our police department. So I was able to credit some of the salary line item for the hours that they entail.
So those budget lines then become, I guess, technically underruns
Yes.
by virtue of the credit.
Right.
So then bringing this, I guess procedurally speaking, bringing this to the town meeting is would be to put forth the proposal that the line item transfer is acted in whatever the dollar amount is remaining
Yes.
to complete the cost. Okay.
Yeah, just the fact that it wasn't in the budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No fund balance.
And Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, the Board of Selectmen met on March 8th. We heard the presentation by the chief, and we made the motion at that point to go forward to your board with a motion for $108,249.80 to cover the exact cost of this purchase. So in front of you right now is that same request. We require you, if you so choose, to vote forward to go to as required by the town charter, to go to basically a town meeting, and then we could talk about how we would go from that point for an actual vote.
Could you repeat the exact dollars?
Sure, $108,249.80.
Thank you.
And if you do choose to go forward to a town meeting, obviously we'd have to follow the guidelines for that, and I think we talked briefly about date that might be appropriate. Just make sure we have it in legal notice and go forward.
That number would cover the entire cost.
To the penny. We hope.
And $108, you have to do a referendum.
That's what we have to verify with the way that the town meeting would be held. I'm looking at it right now as, just to get into some of the weeds here. In the way the town charter reads in section 25B, it says that anything not put into a budget has to therefore go to a town meeting for a vote, and then go to 7 to 14 days after would have to go to either budget meeting or referendum. So I'm getting clarification on that exact way to do that. But the other thing is, if you think about the way the town charter says that, this is a line item transfer from monies that were, really unexpended. But the way it's worded, it says anything not in a budget has to go in front of the town meeting. So we've got to clarify that later on, but for right now, we have to follow what the rule says.
Because we're not using the fund balance. So there's money set in the
Normally we'd come to you and say, look, something happened, a boiler broke, we have to put out, $75,000 into it, so we have to expend that money from the general fund. That's how it would normally work. In this case, we're not taking any money out of the general fund. It really is, a straight line item transfer.
Is there any other questions from Mari?
I have a question. Going back to the first thing, what you talked about, the behavioral assessments will,
I'm sorry,
behavioral assessments?
Yep.
Staggered over the course of 5 years? Is that it? Is it in the budget already?
Yes, yep.
How long would it take to get it?
To get all the replacements? Well, once it gets, if and when it gets approved, we also have to go out to bid. We think our bid's on the higher end, so hopefully it will come under as well. You're talking a few months out, I think. And then we have to make sure we train everybody on it, so we can't just give them this piece of equipment and say, here you go, good luck. So we're gonna have to train them, make sure they understand what's in the car. We gotta get it installed in all the cars, and that also takes time, especially for my mechanic. And that hopefully we don't have a vehicle that goes down while he's installing it.
Mr. Chair, would we be looking to set a date for the town meeting as well, or would we just?
Yeah, we would do that in motion. If we were to vote it through, we would also send it to town meeting to specify it.
I mean, in the motion, we need to specify a date, or would we set the date after the motion?
No, what I was just saying is that in the motion, we would specify the date, in the motion, be specific as far as when it's going to be.
I have another question. You mentioned training, obviously, with new equipment. Who conducts the training? Is there the expense involved in that?
That's all included in there.
You have something from the state saying that they are in fact receptive to all of this?
100%. We signed a memorandum of understanding for 5 years, renewed for the next 25 years, each 5-year increment thereafter.
And you have all of that?
100%. Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion to send this to a town meeting, but just for clarification's sake, do we have a date?
Yeah, Kevin, I know we had looked at the calendar. We had a potential date, right?
Yeah, the calendar that I was looking at gives it, you need to give it a 10-day window to put it out. So anytime in that time frame, I think we're looking at April 5th, if I'm not mistaken. Because if you vote on it tonight, we can talk about putting in a legal ad out immediately.
April 5th, 7 p.m.
Mr. First Selectman, you spoke of just verifying the verbiage of the town charter for this. Do I understand that correctly to say this might not be literally a town meeting for this, but that there are other options that this may unfold?
At the town meeting itself, it sets it to say that you have to vote on it either by town meeting, and I talked to the town elections registrar office, and also we're talking to the town clerk about how we'd be able to do something. There seems to be some confusion on how that would actually work. That night you can actually vote, but it would have to be paper ballot. Or you would take 7 to 14 days to go out to a referendum to all the polls. I would just prefer having to go out to the polls. We have in our budget still enough money for that. I think I'd like to do it safely. That's why I'm proposing it that way. So if you would have a town meeting on April 5th, and at the end of the meeting, if everybody says so, and gives the okay, to refer that to go to a, between 7 and 14 days out, maybe to the April 12th or 19th, to actually go to referendum at the 4 polling places.
And that decision would come at the town meeting, that we would hypothetically.
Yep, hypothetically, if everybody votes to go forward with it, yes.
Would you be required to make absentee ballots for that?
You are one of those.
I am one of those. I'm sorry, but I'm legitimately curious for that, because this is, we're still within that COVID grasp.
But I agree with you as far as going out to the polls as opposed to trying to cram this, as we historically used to do before the days of COVID. Still not a good idea.
And I did verify we do have enough money in the budget to do so. And still, if we ever get to the point where our budget season requires us to go back to the polls again, we have enough money at this point.
What does that cost?
Well, $5,000 or $6,000 roughly.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right, so Mr. Vice Chairman.
I motion that the police department's expense for radio communications is $108,249.80 be heard at a town meeting on April 5th.
7 p.m.
At 7 p.m.
At 7 p.m.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Chief, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, now moving on to citizens' participation. I open the floor. Sir, if you could just state your name and address in town for the record.
Joe Sharon, 7 North Stone Road, Woodsuck. I've talked with you, Tom, and Kevin in the past about this, and I being recently retired, and my wife looking for ways to save money and cut corners on our tax in this town, which I feel are pretty high. I did some research, and I don't want anybody to think I'm against law enforcement, because I'm pro for it all the way. What I am against is the cost. I did some research. I talked with the administrator for the resident trooper program out of the town of Tolland, who is similar, almost identical in square miles to Plainfield and population-wise, and they run with administration and their complete force for $774,000 a year. Our force is up around $2.5 to $3 million plus a year. My question would be, how can they do it so cheap, being right on top of Hartford, where, to me, there's more crime, but ours is so expensive? If we would have cut over $2 million out of our taxes, that would be major savings, especially to us that are retired on fixed budgets. So my question is, how can they do it so reasonable? And I've asked them, I said, how do you feel about your program? Does it work for you? Is everything fine? They said, we have no issues with it whatsoever. And like I said, I'm not against law enforcement, I'm pro for it all the way. But I don't understand how they can do it so reasonable and ours are through the roof. Response?
Any comments from any of the members?
I feel that if the town knew how much money we could save, I mean, granted, if all costs can do it for $774,000 a year, I'm all for it, because I'm not against police one way or the other. What I am against is the cost, and I'm looking for savings, and we have to start somewhere. Between that and education, I mean, it's through the roof. It's bleeding this town dry. People are leaving, they're not coming back. I mean, we have plenty of businesses. You got Amazon that wants to relocate here. You have the wood burning plant. You have Lowe's distribution center. Our taxes should be reasonable, but they're high. And we can cut a lot of fat out of our budget, especially if the town knew what we could save. They need to be educated. There's a lot of people that don't know, or some that frankly don't care. But if they knew, it might be different. It might be something that could be put to a budget vote, or something that could be on the ballot in the wall. I don't know. I've talked about it before, but I didn't want to bring it up in the middle of a budget season because I know how hard it is to finalize a budget and to goof everything up. So I didn't want to throw an iron in the fire. But I think it's time for us to start trying to save money somewhere, because it's getting to the point where we can't live here anymore. And, you know, people are moving to other states that are much cheaper. There's a reason for it. It's cost of living. I don't know if there's any questions or...
Just first, are there any comments or questions from the Board of Finance members?
Yeah, I have a question. You said you spoke to somebody. What town was it again?
Town of Tallinn.
Holland.
Yep, I talked to the administrator, the woman that's in charge of the administration, the secretary, and she said that, you know, based on the population, square miles is almost exactly identical to Plainfield. They have a resident program, and they run it for $774,000 a year, including administrative costs and everything. Now you're talking, you don't have to bother with pensions, I believe. You wouldn't have workman's comp. You don't have the insurance part of it, because the state takes care of everything. And I recently retired from DOT state. I worked for almost 35 years, so I pretty much know how the state operates, a lot of stuff. And they take care of a lot of the stuff that we wouldn't be responsible for. And it's big savings. I mean, I say between $2.5 and $3 million. It's probably even a lot higher. There's other hidden costs that we don't know about. But I'm just going from there. So you figure if you can save between around $2 million a year, how much would that drop your taxes? How much would that drop your mill rate? It's a lot of money. And you got to start somewhere. You can't just keep spending, because the well does run dry, believe it or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I know we've spoken in the past. I do appreciate your input, because I think every voice should be heard. I do have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The trooper program that's run in Tallinn, how many troopers are there?
That I do not know how many they have.
I thought you had said it was 4. And you mentioned
Who was that? I forget, because it's been a while since I talked to her, because I didn't want to keep bothering her. Once I got the information, explained who I was, I didn't want to keep pestering them.
I think it is 4. Second question, do you know the median income for the families in Tallinn, what it is, and what it is in Plainfield?
No, I do not know.
Plainfield is $42,000 for a median family.
Yeah,
Tallinn is $138,000.
yeah.
So they can actually decide how they want to run their town, but they have more money available to them to do other things with. I'm just not sure that this is, in my opinion, the right thing to do. I think this is, what we have right now is an outstanding program with good service, actually excellent service. I'll change that. I think that the idea of bringing it to the table, though, is appropriate. You have done so here. Would you also be going to the police commission to do the same?
I'd like to attend the commission meeting. And bringing it up, Kevin, is because the property taxes on my house in Moose, you know my house
I do.
is over $10,000 a year for property taxes. I don't know many people that are paying $10,000 a year, and it's quite expensive. When every 6 months you got to shell out about $6,000 for everything. And so that's why I'm looking to save money, because the cost of living here is quite expensive.
I understand your concerns. I will do my homework as well. I will look into the questions I asked as well.
Thank you.
The other thing is the mill rates that are comparative to around here as to other towns as well. I'll see if I can put up some information on that as well. So we can look at apples to apples as to what we're actually looking at.
When is the police commission meeting coming up next, do you know?
Yes, it's the fourth Tuesday of the month, so I believe it's the 23rd. Next Tuesday. Next Tuesday.
Okay, 6 o'clock, is good.
6 o'clock.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
can I say anything?
Yep.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I do value your opinion, and I do appreciate the fact that you do support police. I just ask you a couple things, okay? Is one, that you really get an understanding of what the men and women of the Plainfield Police Department do on a daily basis. Today alone, and I'm just going to use today alone as an example, we had 2 and at one point 3 officers on. We responded to 25 calls for service, including a home invasion with an assault rifle, a burglary, a stolen vehicle, 2 motor vehicle crashes, amongst other calls, with 2 to 3 officers on. That's just 25 calls from 6:45 this morning to 5 p.m. I still have the rest of the day left for what they're going to report to. And if you want to start comparing apples to apples, I'll tell you a couple things. One, I too do my homework, I do a lot of it, is the fact that Tolland has half the crime rate as the town of Plainfield. Tolland pays $750,000 for 4 resident troopers. Tolland has a barracks inside Tolland that has 40 to 50 troopers. We are giving you 19 sworn police officers, the community service that Plainfield deserves every single day. Over the last 40 years, there has been numerous studies done on the department, from independent paid companies to interns to law enforcement officers, and most recently within the last couple of years. They have all compared the resident trooper program to having your own independent police force. And time again, and I'll be more than happy to share all the findings, time and time again they came up with the same findings. The same findings is we are understaffed, and the benefits clearly outweigh to have an independent police force rather than a resident trooper program. We had a resident trooper program. We had that in the 70s, and I might even before that, I really don't know. And even during that time, there was 10 to 12 constables under a resident trooper program. In the early 1980s, we had 19 cops. In 2021, we still have 19 police officers. In 2016, the town of Ledyard was a resident trooper program and became independent. In 2016, the town of Killingly actually formed their own police. They are trying to get out of the constabulary force and actually now have constables working under the state police. And Killingly also has a state police barracks that has 30, 40, or 50 troopers. The town of East Lyme in 2017 became their own independent police force. We provide 24/7 protection, 365 days a year. We respond to all calls, from everything from sexual assaults to, unfortunately, homicides, to domestic violence, to suicides. These officers are working nonstop. And I ask that, you just take the opportunity of the time to really come visit me. Come see me. Just come see where the money's actually going, whether it's part of the building, what we have. You'll actually see that we do a lot ourselves to try to save money because, one, I live here. I'm a taxpayer. My wife lives here. She has a small business. We pay taxes, not a whole boat ton, but we try to do things to save money, whether it's painting the walls ourselves, putting down different floorings, rearranging rooms, things that we do because we care about our community and we don't want our taxes to go up. We cover 43 square miles, very similar to Tolland. But you forget the fact that they have 40 to 50 to 60 troopers all within that town. We don't have that luxury. We are the only law enforcement agency here. We do our best compared to what we have. If you start comparing apples to apples of how many police officers we should be upwards of 39 police officers. I don't think we need 39 police officers. I do believe we need more than 19. Yes, is it cheap to run a police department? Nothing's cheap. And nobody wants our taxes to go up. And I'm sorry that your taxes are high, and that stinks. But I want you to know that our services are second to none. We are there every day, no matter what, no matter especially what's going on with out there in the world. We still have our officers, our dispatchers, our men and women coming out every single day. And it doesn't matter whether they hate us one day or they like us the next day, we're still going out every day. So if you do want to compare it, I just gather all the facts and really just come see where your tax dollars go. Because I'll meet with you any day of the week, any time, and just show you. You know, this equipment that we have, we take money from the drug dealers and we buy equipment so the town doesn't have to buy it. I'd love to get a $100,000 drug radio and buy these radios so it doesn't cost us $1 too, but that takes time. So I do value your opinion, please know that I do, but I just want you to know where your money really goes. I really would like you to see and just listen to what these men and women do, because they do a lot.
What I hadn't thought about was about comparing. My brother-in-law just retired about 3 years ago. He was a resident state trooper in Killen, Billy Tucker.
Yep.
And I understand when something big goes down, I mean, if it's a major fire, a murder, a big drug bust, we call the state police in anyway.
We'll call whoever for backup, 100%.
Now, based on that, it was one day last fall on a Saturday, I went by the community lot, the old X-89, there were 3 cruisers sitting in there just talking, and one was coming out of Moosa. So that means it was 4 on the road on a Saturday afternoon in Plainfield. This isn't Chicago. We don't have a homicide every 3 minutes. We're a little hick farming community. And 4 troopers on a Saturday afternoon, that's why they say we don't have enough troopers. And we're understaffed because the planning for these people, there's absolutely no reason to have 4 troopers on patrol on a Saturday in Plainfield.
But my thing is, you don't know what they were doing. You assume that they're sitting there talking, but you don't know what they're planning or what they're doing. And whether we had 4 on, I guarantee probably one of them was on traffic detail and they were just waiting for their crew to show up. Because we don't run 4 officers on at a time. If they do, there's a reason behind it. Either we're doing a narcotics raid or we're doing a different investigation that requires me to bring more in. When you see an officer sitting on the side of the road, you can't automatically assume that that cop is not doing anything. The thing is, we can arrest somebody for a DUI and that police officer's tied up now not only for the processing of the prisoner, but he's tied up for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. What do I do next when I have another officer or another call to go to? You can assume maybe you've had a dealing or maybe you don't need police services. There's a lot of us that like to have that, to know that if I'm going to dial 911, I am going to have Plainfield police officers there within minutes, not 20, 30, 40, 60 minutes later.
But then again, they said one time, one night when I was talking to one of them, I was going to work at DOT at 2 in the morning, I had an ice call, and I turned from Snake Meadow Road onto Moosa Pond Road. I just went over the yellow line a little bit because you can't cut that corner. I got pulled over because he thought I was DWI. Then all of a sudden, a trooper pulls up behind him. I go, why do you have 2 cops here? He says, oh, we always call for backup. I said, you call for backup? I said, for what? No wonder we don't have enough troopers. I said, the state police, if they came over, they wouldn't be calling for backup.
Sir, I understand that, but let me
Chief,
say something.
if I could just interrupt. Yeah, so I certainly wanted to recognize you and give you any other moment to speak. And I can certainly recall on you, sir, but there are a couple other people in the room, so I'd like to give them the opportunity. And again, we can come back to this if necessary.
Thank you for your time.
Yep. Anybody else would like to participate? Mr. Peterson?
The old PD equipment, you said the highway department's using that, some of those frequencies currently. Will that equipment be obsolete too, or will it be used, continue to use, or what?
We're going to have to evaluate that.
If you maintain that frequency in those towers for the trucks, for the town trucks, could the old PD's radios be used for the town side? Possibly for the...
I don't think they have many radios. I don't think they have a few that they actually use.
Okay.
I
The trucks aren't on that radio?
I barely hear them on. We have their own channel, we turn to the town highway department channel. I'd have to get back to you on those exact questions.
I was wondering if we could save some money.
Yep.
Reutilize that stuff, because I'm thinking your equipment's in better shape than what the
I'm
town.
sure it probably is, yes.
And then the other question I have is nothing to do with any of this. The board and with the 2% set aside, I thought that was only for COVID, it was only like a year or two that was going on. It extends out now? I thought when they first presented that, it sounded like it was due to the COVID.
No,
No?
no.
No, and again, what I remember is that, I remember the Board of Selectmen had discussed it, they adopted it, and then it went to the Board of Finance to discuss, obviously, the same exact thing, but I don't remember it just specifically being for COVID.
I thought they created it, I thought I understood that it was created to do something with the monies left over from the COVID, because we weren't going to spend it all. And that's why it was created. So I assumed it was going to end after a year or two
But not.
and go on.
I have a copy of the actual statute in my office, and you're welcome, I'll make a copy afterwards.
All right, thanks. And also, what's our current bill rate?
2833.
28.33, 2833.
Holland is, through a Google search, is 36.05.
All right, anyone else? Citizen participation? No, okay. Then on that note, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So be it.
Second.
Okay? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? We are adjourned, 7:53. Just one thing to note, we do have an upcoming meeting.